Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's web seminar, Invisible Banking from Clicks to Codes. My name is Mike Perkowski with American Banker, and I'm pleased to be the moderator for today's event. This webinar will explore the future of banking and assess opportunities to leverage important technologies, including artificial intelligence, machine learning, GenAI, and the cloud, in transforming the banking value chain. During our discussion, our industry experts will reflect on the evolution as it embraces a hyper-digital mindset designed for banking customers' dramatically evolving needs and expectations. Not only are the digital natives critical to this transformation, but customers used to a more traditional relationship with their banks are influential in what banks must do in order to create a more satisfying customer experience. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank our sponsor for today's program, Tata Consultancy Services. We certainly appreciate their support. Just a few quick housekeeping items before we dive into our discussion. During today's program, we will ask for your participation in 2 polling questions. We think you'll find these polling questions interesting and easy to answer, and we look forward to providing you with additional insights based on the results. Also, we encourage you to submit questions for our panelists in the Q&A panel. We'll do our best to cover as many questions as possible during our program. If we can't reply during our live web seminar, someone from TCS will be in touch shortly after this event. All right, now it's time to meet our panelists for today's program. Mohan Vituri is Vice President and Head of the BFSI Business Unit at Tata Consultancy, and he's Chief Executive for TCS eService International. He has more than 29 years of experience driving strategy, business growth, and transformation for banking, financial services, and insurance clients. Sachin Tandon is Principal Global Banking at Amazon Web Services. He brings more than 20 years experience in consulting expertise from EY and Accenture, as well as industry experience with JP Morgan Chase and Fidelity Investments. And Rajiv Trivedi is the head of sales and go-to-market for the AWS business unit at TCS. Specifically, he leads TCS's efforts across North America and Latin America, leveraging TCS's deep industry and domain expertise to harness AWS technologies and delivering transformational solutions for customers. This seminar will give you a sense of the dramatic change that's going on in the banking industry, and more importantly, what banks can and should do in order to understand, anticipate, and respond to customers' rapidly changing requirements of their banking relationships. It also will cover the critical nature of the key technologies banks should incorporate in order to ensure their systems are future ready. Now, let's move on to our first polling question before we begin the conversation. So we'd like to get your answer to the following question. How far is your organization in leveraging AI, machine learning, and GenAI in its digital transformation journey? So we want you to pick the one that corresponds to where you feel your organization is today. Are you still in the early exploration phase with limited proof points to scale up investments? Are you in the advanced exploration phase with significant proof points to scale up those investments? Are you past the exploration phase with proven early successes ready to be scaled and replicated across the organization? Or are you ahead in the journey with respect to your peers with multiple successful projects in production yielding tangible benefits? Again, please pick the one answer that best corresponds to where your organization is today in leveraging AI, machine learning, and GenAI in digital transformation journey. Okay, we're going to give you a few more seconds to give us your answer. When we've reached critical mass, we will share the results with you, and then we will begin our program. Okay, we have a pretty good representation right now, so let's take a look and see what the numbers look like. Okay, so very large percentage of you, majority, in fact, 2/3 say that you're still in the early exploration phase with limited proof points to scale up investments. 14% of you said your organizations are in the advanced exploration phase. 10% of you said that you're past the exploration phase with early successes. And 10% of you feel that your organization is ahead of your peers in your journey. So that's good. That gives us a really good cross-section of people with different requirements, different experiences. And we want to move on now to our panelists to begin our discussion. Okay, we're going to focus on 4 major areas today. Expectations from customers and the industry, how banks can stay relevant in the midst of all of this change, the power of AI as a transformational technology, and then lastly, areas of focus for banks, including some what we refer to as watch-out items that people need to be aware of. All right, so let's begin our conversation with the panelists. Sachin, I'd like to start with you. As we move deeper into 2025, how do you see banking customers' expectations evolving, and what do you see their key asks and pain points?
Yeah, it's a great question, Mike, to kick this off. And I think customer expectations, what I would like to say, they continue to evolve. They have been evolving as we look at banking over the last decade or so, and they continue to evolve with customers really looking for more and more frictionless and seamless experiences. And this is something that when we talk about it, it's about how do you unify a cross-platform experience. When you think about mobile, web, voice channels, you're interacting through multiple channels. It's become pretty much table stakes to have that kind of seamless digital experience, which we know that still banks are struggling in a number of ways to kind of deliver that in what customers are asking. Clearly, if you think about personalization, that's something we see more and more, and research is pointing out that customers are much more open now to letting banks use their data to drive hyper-personalized recommendations for them. And this is something that used to be in the past where customers were not so open to this, but now research is pointing through multiple third-party researches, we have seen that up to 70% of customers are actually looking for really hyper-personalized recommendations. And what I mean by that is like recommendations that are suited specific to individuals based on whether it's their past transaction behavior, whether it's based on their needs and wants. That's kind of what we're looking at from a hyper-personalization perspective. The other things that what I would say come to mind is certainly thinking about as you look at the current economic environment with the inflation kind of where there is, looking for better budgeting and financial planning tools. Customers are really keen on if banks are watching out for them and providing them those suggestions or how they can really be better planning their budgets or better having financial planning as they look into the future. And the lack of that is really something that customers are not happy about. So they're certainly more keen on getting that aspect baked in. We see more and more demand for embedded financial services. So keen about like, if you are interacting with one bank, is it possible to really be able to have other services such as looking at whether it's financial planning tools, insurance, or other things provided through the same banking platform so that you don't have to go to other places. You're bringing it together at one place. So having that embedded aspect of financial services is certainly another thing that customers are becoming more and more keen about. And they're seeing this as more like, I would say, financial services not as separate, but more like have you like having products from a finance perspective delivered to you at the moments that matter. Right? It's the moment of the journey you have, whether it's you're making a purchase and you get an option to do financing there, or whether you're kind of looking at travel things and you're getting an option to really kind of look at different offers from your bank there. There could be many ways of thinking about that, but that's kind of where we're seeing more and more asks from customers. And the last thing I would just point out is security and privacy is certainly top of mind. We have seen a lot of cases of fraud and scams pick up, particularly with, as we see in the last year with generative AI come in, we have seen an uptick in the fraud side of things, which customers are wary about, and security and privacy still continues to be top concern. While asking for these other things, they certainly want to make sure that the bank they're dealing with or the financial institution they're dealing with is providing them secure and private privacy around the data protection aspects as well. So really what I would say the key shift is customers increasingly are expecting banking to be more proactive rather than reactive. They want their financial institutions to anticipate prevent problems and provide guidance while kind of maintaining the highest levels of accuracy and privacy.
Okay, those are great starting points about expectations. In particular, I'm intrigued by the ones, I know we're going to come back to them, about the whole idea of frictionless and of hyper-personalization. I think those are obviously going to be recurring themes. Mohan, I want to move to you. Relating to these, how are banks evaluating these changing customer expectations now? And how should banks be engaging with their customers, especially what we hear so much about the Generation Alpha customer, the digital first customer? How should banks be evaluating these changing expectations, and how should they be engaging with these customers?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Good afternoon. I think Mike, Sachin is very right. The expectations of customer, earlier you talked about Gen Alpha, and we used to think that the expectations of Gen Alpha who are in the 14-15 age group, or Gen Z or millennials would be different from rest of the customer segments. But increasingly what's happening is, irrespective of the segmentation of the customers, the expectations of the digital age are the same. I would think across the board, the banks must go today to the places where the consumers go, and they have to deliver the services in real time or near real time. And there is actually no second thought for the customer. Sometimes they take the decisions very swift, very fast. So catering to customer expectations has become increasingly, banks struggle for relevance, existence, I would think. So I would divide the imperatives for banks into two groups broadly. One is educate and enable. The other one is to engage. I would explain both. It is very important for banks also to ensure that financial literacy sometimes could be a cliche term, but it is very important for banks to educate customers about their products and services and about the importance of financial awareness as such. So there was actually an interesting survey where a lot of people intuitively would think that customers of the digital age would be least interested in understanding the importance of financial matters, and they would just go about doing just-in-time banking and getting to know things in an ad hoc way. But it is not true. The results of the survey speak up that more than 90% of the respondents of the survey said they would be very keen. These are all, the respondents are all for digital natives, as you may call them. The Gen Alphas that you referred to, the Gen Zs or the millennials, they all showed a lot of interest in understanding the aspects of financial investments. They all want to maximize their wealth. They all want to plan very well. They understand that their awareness levels may be low, so they want to be educated. But here comes the catch. They want to, they'll spend time on the platform of their choice. So one of the imperatives for the banks, and the banks are going about it today, is to take the financial literacy or the awareness building campaigns to the place where customers are. Sachin talked very rightly about frictionless banking and embedded finance. So for finance to become embedded, it has to go to the places where the customers are. So I said education is the starting point. So banks are investing and are supposed to invest even more to spread the awareness campaigns. And like I said, take it to the platforms where consumers spend most time. For example, gamified finance is catching up very fast. Can I explain the importance of financial matters using gamified, user experience channels? So that's one part where banks, I think, would definitely strive to put in some efforts. I also talked about engaging with the customers, and you also referred to that. Once the education is built and the enablement is done, how do I engage with the customers and engage them into the products and services of my bank? This is where I think some catch-up is required. I would definitely think. I would think that it is important for banks to also understand what type of interests are evolving. For example, there are third-party apps, there are aggregators, there are super apps, where Sachin was talking about everybody wants to actually see all services in one place. They do not want to go to multiple places. So super apps are gaining traction. Third-party aggregator apps are gaining traction. So how do banks go to the doorstep of those platforms? Social media platforms are where the Gen Alpha spend their time. How do I take banking into social media platforms? That's where I would think, Mike, a lot of discussion is happening among the banks, and there is some catch up to do as well.
Okay, very good points. Your comments about engagement in particular relate back really nicely to what Sachin was talking about regarding both frictionless and hyper-personalization. But obviously, to make all that happen, to make that engagement possible, we have to have the right systems in place. Rajiv, what do banks need to do in order to ensure their technical readiness to meet these expectations?
Thanks, Mike. First of all, good afternoon to everyone. It's a very interesting perspective that Mohan and Sachin talked about. And if I look at it from a technology perspective, technology is evolving fast, but customer expectations are evolving even faster, right? So it's at the end of the day, it matters in the fact that how are you using that technology at an incremental value with the speed, right? Some of the key R's that I personally would relate to, and the way customers have actually talked about the frictionless point that Sachin talked about. It's super important. Thereby, how do you enable the power of cloud, the APIification for the integration, bringing in areas like biometric authentications, right, which enables that faster frictionless transactions that consumers are looking for, right? Another example is that Gen Alpha. In fact, not only Gen Alpha, pretty much the consumer base is becoming digital native, and they really need financial insights, right? Some predictive and proactive support or guidance from their financial institutes. Right? That's when, how do you leverage the power of data? How do you collect that data using the right technology? So that way you have a very insightful view on consumer behaviors. Thereby, you enable that to enrich the experience. I think all of this without a complete governance on data and privacy, I call it as the security assurance, is something is going to be the de facto standard, right? We really need to address that. So using cloud, especially AI and data with the cloud native architecture is something that I see a great promise to have these things enabled. At the end of the day, technology is ready. I believe you will have an answer from the technologies that is available today. It's a fast evolving space. It's not going to be about whether I use the right technology. It's about the adoption and the speed of execution that which will determine the success, right? So that's where I believe banks needs to master the AI-driven personalization, empowering the cloud-native infrastructure, and embedded finance in which the customer expectations are met. So that's how I see, Mike.
Thank you, Rajiv. Okay, so let's move on to the next issue. Obviously, meeting and exceeding customers' expectations is vital to banks that are looking to sustain and extend their relevance amid all this change. So, Mohan, let's start with you. How can traditional banks remain relevant in an era where consumers prefer a digital-first, seamless financial experience?
Yeah. No, I think a very interesting question. And Rajiv talked about some of the imperatives and some of the investments that banks have to do. Those things become all the more necessary for traditional banks, I would think, particularly banks that have actually grown their systems in a monolithic way. They have a lot of catch up to do and a lot of updates to do. I mentioned about the imperatives that banks need to basically invest in, particularly from an education perspective and engaging perspective. But is that enough? I would think no. Banks have to go one step forward, particularly traditional banks, as you referred to. They have to, in order to actually have the aspects of invisible banking get into their products and services, they have to set their fundamentals right. building the fundamental capabilities, I would think, would be extremely important. Rajiv referred to data. I would definitely endorse that statement. See, a data-driven organization that invested very well in data estate modernization always would be ready to kind of foray into the new age services. So traditional banks have a lot more kind of investments to put into data, particularly whether it is actually ensuring that the data is clean, whether it is ready to be coupled to the services. Once that is done, Mike, I would think for traditional banks, they need to focus, and some of them are doing kind of good work here, but some of them have some kind of improvements to do. They have to also get into the new business models to be coupled to their enterprise systems. It could be opening up their systems into banking as a service enablement. It could be kind of championing open banking concepts. There is still a lot of work to do in this area. And only when you have a robust underlying data that is clean, that is ready to cater to the external world, and only when you have the services and the new business models, such as banking as a service built on top of it, they'll be able to definitely get into where the customers go to. That is where embedded banking or embedded finance really basically becomes fructified. Last but not the least, I think the mindset is very important for traditional banks. One of the problems, Mike, historically for traditional banks is that the overall culture is not still aligned with the fintech mindset, as we call. So sometimes what tends to happen, the new age fintechs, they seem to be running away with the customer capture. So how do banks develop the fintech mindset as an organizational culture is where I would think they need to basically put in some efforts. Once all this fundamental setting is in place and the foundation is laid, I would think it becomes very easy to get into the new business models. There are new business models which most banks are today considering. We saw the survey and the results of the survey. Everybody is still in the initial tranche where they are trying to do proofs of concepts and catch up. But are they doing enough proof of concepting in the areas of autonomous banking? Are they thinking that one day the chatbot would not only recommend but would complete the transaction? Are they actually coupling their robo advisors into where the point of purchase for the customer is? This is where I would think traditional banks today, they have begun to invest, but they have to do a lot more, Mike.
Okay, Mohan, thank you very much. Sachin, let's go to you. Obviously, the importance of customer experience is critical for banks to remain relevant. So what do you think are the new avenues that banks can explore and should explore in order to elevate customer experience?
Yeah, what I would do, I mean, first I would like to kind of acknowledge what some of the things that Mohan just said, right? I think the points that Mohan made around data, absolutely critical, right? When we think about customer experience, you're really kind of, data is the foundation of that, right? In terms of how you're looking to evolve your customer journey, data becomes pivotal. And that's what we see still banks kind of still are challenged with that. And banks are in different stage of maturity. I speak to banks globally across the world, talking to them about how they're looking to enhance their customer experience. And as we look at that, data becomes a big discussion point around, okay, where do you stand currently in your data structure? How are you handling that? If you think about simply putting together a customer 360 view, that in itself, which is not a new concept, but is a concept certainly like that's top of mind for a lot of our banking customers right now, because you want to get that view overall of what your customer is engaging with you throughout all the different channels in order to give them a seamless experience. So there's an aspect of that Mohan brought up that I certainly want to acknowledge here. But as we look about also what can banks do, what I would say is, what I speak to our customers is about, look at the end-to-end customer journey that you have, right? As you engage with your end customers, what does that end-to-end journey look like? And let's kind of break that down all the way from when you're looking at targeting new customers or cross-selling to customers, to how you're onboarding, how you're servicing the customers, how you're thinking of personalization. There's various different aspects that go into this whole conversation about customer experience. And the other thing I would like to point out is about, there was a time when you would say, oh, customer experience, looking at just the digital side of things. But there's also an element of this, which is the employee experience, right? So think about agents that are serving the customers. Think about the internal processes that are there, which in turn are needed for customers to, let's say, apply for a loan and get approved for a loan. You got to look at EX and CX, the way I say it, as one cohesive kind of story there. So looking at employee experience, customer experience together in a very convergent manner is something that we're starting to see a lot more with banks. We can think about a number of the generative AI use cases that have taken place over the last year. And we're seeing more and more of like, how do you continue to enhance that experience of your customers, even if it's by helping your agents serve your customer better, in the end is leading to a better customer experience. So think about that aspect in terms of how do you really remove the friction, whether it's from your internal processes or from your customer side of things. It becomes super important. The other thing I would point out also is, while this is all great, we can say you deliver this, deliver that, we have to also acknowledge that traditional banks particularly still have some of the legacy systems, and some of that is sitting on mainframes and old systems where a lot of the core infrastructure still needs to be looked at. How do you modernize the stack? How do you make sure that the data that's sitting in the core systems is available for you to look at some of these enhanced experiences that you want to try and deliver through AI, machine learning, generative AI? So there are certainly some roadblocks that are there. There's a roadblock of also looking at how do you continue to upskill your talent in order to really deliver on these latest technologies so you can enhance the experience. So there are still some challenges the banks need to address internally, which are a little bit of a detriment, I would say, in terms of getting to a better customer experience. And so what I would say is, like, there, as we look at banks that are delivering this or looking into the future, they're finding ways of how they can really it's not like you want to say, I want to modernize all my systems, then do like X, then more. You have to think about an approach which is really allowing you to continue in that journey of innovation while also thinking about modernizing your stack in parallel. So there's an element of that you have to really think through the strategy upfront, and then have that roadmap which allows you to stay in line or ahead of the competition while continue to addressing some of the longer term challenges that you might have.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned modernizing the technology stack. That's a really good segue to Rajiv, who I'd really like to hear from you, Rajiv. What are you excited about from a technology perspective that is allowing traditional financial institutions and banks to remain relevant?
I think if I look at it, the power of AI, right, and with the advancement of generative AI, the possibilities are unlimited, right? Like, you can pick any area of the banking value system, and you can see technology making an impact around it, right? But a few of the things that I would actually particularly quote, the point that Sachin just talked about, the core systems, right? Today, it is one of the big rock, right, which banks needs to look at it very critically, and see how do they modernize. And it's not about the one large scale modernization that they would have to go after. It's about the point that I said earlier, that the incremental progress that we can include into these core systems, which drives some of the excitements, right? And that's where AI, generative AI, can actually really help you decipher the chain, the business logic, and whatnot, giving you that advantage, which helps you understand what part of my bank's value chain needs to be modernized, and thereby, can I take a very risk versus reward parity based approach that enables me to do this changes, right, and eventually deliver the frictionless banking experience for the consumers. Another example that actually Mohan talked about, banking as a service, I call it, is that it's very evolving space where Gen Alphas are actually shaping how the bankings will. I think we all can agree that they're not going to visit the branch. They are probably not even going to look at it only one app. They expect financial services to be within the platforms that they use, right? Mohan talked about the gamification aspects of it, right? Be it in social media or a metaverse space, consumers are working at a different space. Can you really go to those touch points and make those changes? And today, I believe that technology offers that capability at much rapid advancement space that we could think a couple of years back. At the end of the day, as I call it, is the way we see banks understanding the customers today, they will invest, and that's where the data will actually play a role in terms of understanding the consumer behaviors, the one which I talked about. Eventually, making sure that banking is not just the aspects of financial transaction, is the way how you adapt to the lifestyle of your consumers, and thereby you are omnipresent. So these are some of the areas where I see quite a bit of excitement. The investments that you do into this, bringing the realization of these capabilities into your system, will determine how satisfied your consumer base is, and thereby how the impact that you are making into the overall ecosystem. So that's how I see, Mike, the excitements moving around. Yeah.
So Rajiv, those are excellent points, and your comments provide a very nice segue to talking about the next thing about the role of AI in particular in making this happen. So what role do you see technologies like AI, as well as cloud and machine learning and APIs, what do you see that role playing in helping banks exploit what's been called the invisible banking strategy?
Yeah, and absolutely, Mike. In fact, when we use a term invisible banking, I think the first thing which comes in my mind is practically banking without banks, right? I think if you look at it, most of the financial institutes of the future, they won't feel like banks, right? They will be invisible partners in our daily digital lives. The example that I would actually like to quote from the Uber, right? Uber doesn't have any payment step. It's a transaction embedded into the experience, right? And thereby, how are we shifting a shift from service providers to silent enablers? I think that's an area where the invisible banking will benefit the most, using the capabilities of AI, cloud, and the whole aspects of the APIfication will enable. Another area that I see, where technology playing a pivotal role, is predicting the financial needs before even customers do, right? And that's when the AI-driven behavior analysis, predictive modeling. How do you ensure that you have those insights early on, which you can actually cater to in a very customized, hyper personalized experience that you would actually give it to your consumers. Another area that I see where quite a lot of investment is going, I think example that I would like to quote is the Amazon Just Walkout, right? Payment happens automatically, and as soon as customer leaves the store, right? I call it as banking without screens, right? And that's when you see the smart devices, the IoT playing a very crucial role in terms of enabling these capabilities. To Mohan's point, where you interface and you interact and you deliver that experience where consumers are working. At the end of the day, I see that banking is moving beyond apps. You will see car will be paying for your fuel, or your refrigerator will be ordering the groceries, or your smart assistant will handle the investment without a consumer lifting a finger. So the way I see it is, technology is going to radically change the way banking will happen. It would move from integration to the interactions, and winners in this particular space, right, will be those who are able to use these technologies seamlessly, securely, invisibly. I think that's how I see the perspective, by interacting the customers that we cater to at TCS.
Excellent. Thank you, Rajiv. Sachin, let's go to you. How do you see AI-powered invisible banking influencing the future of the financial services industry?
Yeah, I think the way I like to, I mean, AI is certainly making great strides, right? And what I would say is, particularly in the last, I'd say, 18 months to 2 years, with the advent of generative AI, I think I would say it's a major technological advancement that continues to enhance the what banks can deliver as experiences to their customers, how they can transform operations, improve employee productivity. So there's a lot of kind of going on with with kind of what the technology advancements have been happening over the last couple of years. And what I would say is AI-driven personal bank, invisible banking, will allow financial services to be embedded seamlessly. Apologies.
Maybe, yeah, go ahead. Yeah. So I think let me pick it up, Sachin. From where you left, right? I think the way I see it is, Mike. Overall, the perspective of how are we actually shaping the customer experience, right? Which eventually leads to an omnipresent, invisible banking environment. And I think the shift is, as I said earlier, is that you become a silent enabler instead of the service provider, right? So I think that's where I see a lot of value that is getting delivered to the consumers. Gen Alpha, I know we are talking about Gen Alpha, but the study that we did at TCS, we found that even pretty much every class of the generation is using digital banking post COVID more often than otherwise. So I think that's where the silent enabler part of being banking natively digital is super critical and important, Mike.
Okay. Great, thank you. Mohan, I want to come to you. What do you see as the top 3 areas that banks can and should invest in from a technology standpoint?
Yeah. So, Mike, I think very interesting points that came up so far. We talked about, we began, from the very education and financial literacy part, how awareness can be spread around. We talked about, leveraging AI. We talked about data. We talked about the foundational elements that banks actually have to invest in. But if you ask me, the fundamental concern for a bank would be that, do I have the return on investment coming in? There are a lot of things, a lot of new things, a lot of technologies that actually have recently advanced a lot. But if I put them to use and if I burn all the dollars, do I have basically the results showing up in year 1, year 2, or do I need to wait for year 5? So one of the things I would think definitely, even before talking about what technology areas that I would invest in, I need to have an investment strategy. I need to have an investment plan. I need to have the return on investments worked out. So for one of the fundamental things I would think is there should be a plan, strategy and a business model and a business case worked out, first of all. And that gives me the roadmap or the prioritization. Once I do have it, I would think, to your question on what areas, particularly in the technology side, that I would invest in, I would group all that we have talked about into 3 buckets, Mike. I would bucket them into customer experience. I would think that the concept that we are talking about, where banking becomes invisible banking, getting itself embedded into the day-to-day activities and life of the consumers, for it to bear fruition, I would think that a context-aware finance strategy has to evolve. So I would definitely put one bucket of my investments in personalized and context-aware finance, where I would need to, as a bank, evolve what we do beyond the day-to-day selling of hard-coded products and services to products and services that actually take shape as we understand the patterns of customer behavior, as we understand the preferences of customer behavior, as we notice changes in such customer behavior. Am I able to, as a bank, in an agile way, tune my services and my products That is where the crux lies, and that is where my investments would go. Because today, one of the biggest concerns for a bank would be, we understand, we have all the data, and we understand what the customers want. But for me to create an offering or develop a product or a service that caters to my customers' needs, it takes ages in a monolithic traditional way of banking. Can I make it faster and quicker? So that's where my bucket one would go. My bucket two of investments, of course, is to all that Rajiv talked about. Now we have the advent of GenAI is making things much faster, more seamless. So can I bucket my investments into cognitive banking, where all this paraphernalia we talked about, the robo advisors, the GenAI chatbots, the voice assistants, they all are now like more knowledgeable. They have the power of the data and the information. What's my strategy about leveraging them? What's my strategy and investment about human machine collaboration? That will be my bucket two. And my bucket three would be last but not least. In the very preamble, Sachin spoke about the end consumer's concern on privacy, on data privacy, on information security. Rajiv also alluded to the same. As a bank, for the bank, the strategy and the investments must always start with ensuring customers' information is protected. So my bucket number three for investments in technology would be to ensure that my customers are safe. So compliance, privacy, information security would be my third one.
All excellent points. The security one is one I'm glad we did not forget, because it's so integral to building and maintaining customer confidence, which is everything, as we know. So Mohan's points really highlight the need for financial institutions to have this strong sense of prioritization and also an understanding of risk. So let's talk for a few minutes about some areas of focus for banks, as well as some of what we would call watch out items, things that they need to be aware of. Mohan, I want to come back to you. We're hearing a lot about things like banking as a service, open banking, and other trends. How should banks evaluate and adopt these new capabilities? And what are the challenges they need to be aware of as they incorporate this functionality?
Great question, Mike. Great question. See, we talked about the building blocks and we talked about what banks need to do, but there was also a mention about the ecosystem, in the sense like sometimes you need to couple multiple parties together. And again, Sachin and Rajiv were referring to how everything needs to be done in one place. So as a bank, that means that I also have the challenge of understanding the ecosystem. Sometimes as a bank, I would think I have all the security, built in, that I have taken care of the privacy, data privacy of my customers. But when we are getting into a super app, when we are actually partnering with an aggregator, or we are getting into a gamified finance, there are so many parties and partners in the ecosystem. So understanding how the ecosystem would behave if I don't invest in, if I don't pay attention to, then no matter how much as a bank I have actually put in my efforts, they all go in vain. To your question on what are the challenges that I need to be aware of from a bank side of the world, I must be fully conscious of the ecosystem that I am partnering with. And in the hurry to cater to my customers' needs, I can't actually throw my customers' data to the winds. So it is not just enough that I have ensured my own security, but I have also the bond and duty to ensure the security of the ecosystem. So ecosystem awareness, challenges, understanding, mitigation, risks would be my priority number one. My priority number two would be to also understand the law of the lands. As GenAI is developing, there are a lot of governmental bodies, a lot of forums, a lot of consortiums. Everybody is talking about constructing responsible structure around GenAI. We are hearing about explainability. We are talking about responsible AI. So as new laws develop, how do I ensure that I'm fully aware of the laws of the land and I cater to my customer fully compliant? That would be where my my second challenge and mitigation plan goes. My last but not the least, the challenges of cybersecurity. So the third bucket would be basically on cybersecurity. You also referred to, I think there are many challenges, Mike, from understanding the challenges and ensuring that I have the mitigation plans in place. There is a lot of work to do in the industry. We are all hearing about post-quantum cryptography. Once quantum is in, every password gets broken in microseconds. So do I have, with so much of ecosystem opening up now, taking invisible banking to the doorstep of where the activities of my consumer happen? Have I taken care of the cybersecurity aspects? Have I taken care of what perhaps the bad elements out there are equipped with? That's where my challenges today basically go. There is a lot of work to do from bank's perspective to put in the required mitigation plans, but it is fast going there, Mike, fast going there.
Thank you, Mohan. Sachin, how about you? What are the other key areas that you think banks need to watch out for, and how do these challenges or obstacles impact the customer experience in banking?
Yeah, and I would say Mohan covered some great points here in terms of some of the challenges and obstacles that the banks are facing, right? What I would say, I would want to point out a couple of focus areas and areas that we see banks really look at right now. So we talked about open banking here. That's certainly a topic of discussion in the US right now, given the latest regulation. But obviously, pending certain litigations that are out there, that's something an area to watch out for. But as keeping that in mind, the key is to establish the right kind of guardrails and having the right kind of partners that you engage with, so that you can make that as a success. And it's I would say there's an element of that that's just compliance, but beyond that, it's the idea about how do you leverage the opportunity it can create for you, whether it's related to having that view of how your customers are engaging with other areas beyond just your bank and bringing that data together to drive hyper personalization. That is, like, if you think about what does it really give you in terms of the benefit, where are some of the use cases? And we have some great examples of this from other parts of the world where open banking has been already implemented, whether it's in Latin America or in Europe. And I think banks should look at that and see, okay, what are some of those good success stories out there, and what can we learn from that? So that's an area that I would kind of point out. Certainly, generative AI and the advent of that is great out there. We, I would say, if we go back 1 year, we were seeing banks still kind of in the proof of concept stage. But now, if you look at it, there's a number of use cases that are already in production this year, which are truly leveraging generative AI. And I would say this continues to go on, right? There's still an element of, like, if you're direct to customer, there's a human in the loop element that banks are still having. But we see more and more of that changing. The agentic workflow aspect discussion that's come up, that's big right now in terms of all the conversations that we are seeing happen with our customers and globally that we are seeing out there. Some things that have been discussed at recent conferences as well. How can agentic workflows truly transform the business is what's being looked at. So how can really technology drive change in terms of the process, the business process that we are looking at? So that's something, an area to be watching out for as we look into the future of what this technology change could bring in. So there's certainly, like, I would say there's in areas which are far from today, but then there's areas that are already, things are happening, and banks should certainly focus on what they can control, but also not. The one thing that we have seen that works well for banks is bring in your risk compliance teams, legal teams early on. So if a bank is doing a proof of concept, bring on those teams early on so that they're part of that process, and you're not waiting till the end to uncover some things that you should have looked at, which basically delays everything in terms of going to production. So having that engagement early on is also important. So those are just some of the points that come to mind here that I would like to point out.
Thank you, Sachin. Rajiv, let's wrap up with you. From a standpoint of technical readiness, what are the big things that banks need to watch out for as they implement these new solutions and as they incorporate exciting but somewhat challenging technologies themselves, like GenAI and machine learning, et cetera?
Yeah, Mike. So I think between Sachin and Mohan, they covered quite a depth already. But I think the way I see, in continuation to what they've said, first of all, we all are embracing AI, Gen AI. We know that we need to manage the decentralized systems. How do you handle the embedded finance? So thereby, looking from a technology point of view, we really need to ensure scalability, security, and a seamless integration without breaking the trust. I think that's the way I see a need of an hour is. Now, in order to address this, the biggest watch out area, in my opinion, is the fragmentation that banks has to deal with it. Right, the security risk that we all would agree. But the most important aspect I would actually highlight is the ethical AI governance that you would actually put it into the environment, the guardrails that you look for, right? When we look at it, the overall digital fragmentation or integration challenges for a bank, we know that legacy core systems that banks struggle to integrate with the modern cloud native solution is an area they really need to double down on it, right? I think that's the number one priority, in my opinion. If you see from a point that one highlighted about the quantum, cybersecurity and quantum threats are real. In fact, we know that many institutions, some of the ones where we are actively working with our customers, where how can you create a quantum safe encryption, right? Today's encryption is not good enough when quantum is coming into the play, right? So thereby, ensuring that banks are able to signal the urgency or a future proofing the security is taken care of. Digital inclusion and algorithmic biases, I think that's where we really need to see a bit more, in a critical way on how do you train your data sets, right? Your AI models on the diverse data sets, which can prevent systematic bias in the areas like credit access and whatnot, right? I think overall, the way I see and love to summarize the way I kind of experience every day is that banking is not going to be all about using the technology. It's about effectively orchestrating the seamless, secure, trusted financial ecosystem. At the end of the day, the banks that will proactively address the fragmentation, the cybersecurity or AI bias that I talked about, will lead the overall next era of financial innovation. Thanks, Mike.
Rajiv, thank you very much. Okay, we're near the end of our program, but I do want to take a minute to take at least one quick question from the audience. Mohan, I'd like to direct this to you. Our audience member asks, how does the future look for regional or community banks?
That's a great question, Mike. That's a great question. See, I think from leveraging some of these trends that we talked about and going to the doorstep of the consumer, leveraging invisible banking or embedded finance or whatever we call it, I think the good news is that regional banks are much better off doing it, because they do have systems which are sizable that can be quickly tuned. But now the flip side is, do they have the firepower to fail fast? Do they have the investments to calculate the ROI? Can they partner with so many in the ecosystem? They may not have the firepower required, unlike some of the major banks. So the regional and community banks, I would think, would need to partner a lot, develop the ecosystems, partner with a lot of players out there in the market to do proof of concepting, understand how it fits into their ROI, and then quickly go about implementing some of the things that we talk about. But I would think definitely regional banks and community banks, once they become successful, they can quickly expand their segmentation and grow fast as well, because today's consumer base really is going where the services fit into their framework of expectations. So yeah, I would definitely be gung-ho and optimistic.
Okay, well, that does conclude our program for today. I want to thank, first of all, Mohan, Sachin, and Rajiv for spending time with us today, for sharing their ideas and their insights and their recommendations. Of course, once again, I'd like to acknowledge and thank Tata Consultancy Services for sponsoring today's program. We appreciate their support. And last and certainly not least, we want to thank all of you who attended our program today. We're glad you could spend some time with us and take a little bit of time out of your busy day to learn more about this topic. And we hope you'll join us for a future web seminar brought to you by American Banker and its partners. So on behalf of your speakers, your sponsor, and your host, thank you all for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. We hope you have a great and safe day.